on a shirt. That's what I'm trying to do. Get it put on a shirt.
I see what I can do. I might be able to put it on the shirt for you.
Well, I have a girl making me a shirt
Well,
right
fine then.
now.
Go see somebody else.
No, no, because she just started her t-shirt business, and I was like, okay,
So
let
did
me
I.
help you out.
I have a
Oh
t-shirt
yeah,
company.
you
Easy.
do.
Don't
See, I be forgetting. I'm sorry.
dehumanize me. I see it. I have no value in the world anymore.
What you not gonna do is put my topic against me. That's what you're not gonna do.
Then tell the world about your topic since we here.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Chanel Marie, and I am the host of the Naked Eye podcast. I have been gone for quite some time, but I am back. So I am back indefinitely, trying to get back in the process of doing things daily, posting daily, and all that jazz. It's easier said than done. But today, my topic is dehumanizing of men. And when I say dehumanizing, I say dehumanizing in the sense of men not being seen or having the same publicity as women, men not having the same amount of help and the same amount of reassurance or gratitude that women receive. So, um, what I wanted to dive into was firstly, there was a study that I did read up on, and there's a book actually called Dehumanizing of Men, and it was written by Daniel Jimenez. I believe that's how you say it. If that's not how you say his last name, sorry, dude. But yeah, his name is Daniel Jimenez, and he wrote a book basically not to take away from other entities. He didn't make it biased. He didn't make it as though women's issues aren't important. He didn't make it as though women's issues were too outshining of men, but he did heavily gratify the point of men needing more from society and how our society is basically based off of a feminist perspective. And this really, as a woman, made me sit down, take a seat, and really think about how I have, in a sense, dehumanized any man that I have come into contact with, or how I have put men in unpredictable positions where I felt like what I needed and what I had meant more than what a man actually needs to be able to properly function in a relationship, in a friendship, or anything. Because sometimes we, as women, we think that, oh, whatever I have going on is the only thing that's important at that time. And that's because we work from a state of emotion. So the first point that I wanted to come in from this study of dehumanizing of the male, the study talked about the discourse that currently dictates how gender relations are to be interpreted are from a feminist perspective. So why is that? Because it describes our cultures as patriarchy. So it's kind of like a conspiracy of men being oppressed or men oppressing and exploiting women. And if we think about it, when women do come or feminists come to the table and we're talking about men versus women, the first thing that comes to mind is that men exploit women, men talk down on women, men sexualize women. And, like, that's not always the case. It's not always the case because when we talk about the dehumanizing of men, I'm talking about the men who are at the bottom of the ladder. And society always brings our eye, it draws our eye to the CEOs. It draws our eyes to the majority of men running our or dictating and running our country. The men who are at the top tier, instead of actually giving notice and resource and help to the men who aren't at the top of the corporate ladder. And yes, men up top, they doing their thing or whatever, but they still need resource. And if they did come to need resource, what does a man really have to come to hold on to? Because when I look at it in my city and state, um, the resources are lacking. Resources are very lacking for men in general. So when it comes to especially like mental health or anything that has to do with a man needing a home or anything, you can find a resource for a woman immediately. You can find a resource for a woman within probably like 10, 15 minutes. I got something for you. You can go here to this shelter. They'll take you in. They'll clothe you. They'll do this for you. They'll do that for you. And a woman's femininity is never questioned. Never questioned. That woman is still a woman. But when you think about it and a man asks for help in any given state or context of needing help, I need help tying my shoe because I just had surgery. Oh, you need to stop being so soft and just tie your shoe. A man's masculinity is always questioned when it comes time for him to request or require more help. And that's just not fair. It's just absolutely not fair. So the problem with this is that it is solely based on looking up, as I stated before, which is the top of the corporate ladder, with, like I said, the CEOs, the government, which is ran by majority men. And it suggests that men do greatly at all times at everything. And we know that men are not perfect. Men do not do greatly at everything. Men do require training sometimes. And men do require a portion of help. So why is it that we think that it's okay to really put a man in a place of saying, well, you just need to get your attitude together, and then maybe if you got your attitude together, you'll be in a better state of life. But if we say that same thing to a woman, oh, you need to get your act together. Maybe if you get your act together and get your attitude together, you'll be in a better place of life. Then it becomes a gender issue. You're talking to me like that because I'm a woman. So since I'm a woman, I'm seen as weak. I'm seen as, needing more attention. Whereas, like with men, it's like a man can fix itself immediately and he doesn't need help with anything. When men do go through social issues, men go through issues with mental health, and men go through issues with self identity. What is that? Oh, so something that I wanted to bring up because I saw that it kind of like just played into like some of the social issues that are kind of swept under the rug for men. One of those being a problem with men committing suicide. So I looked up a study and it did show, it confirmed for me that men commit suicide at a much greater population rate than women. And so, but that social issue is not something that is a social issue that is brought to the forefront. When we talk about men, it is not labeled as, oh, yes, men do this and men do that. It is these people, or it is always categorized as these people, or it is also categorized as them, they don't really get a true definition. They don't get a true name. Whereas if it was women and women were being depicted as having a great suicide rate, there's something that needs to be done because now this is a gender issue. So it's not a gender issue when men commit suicide. It doesn't become a gender issue until a woman does it. And that's a problem. So next, I looked up, it says men make up 80% of the homeless population in the United States. So what does that tell you? That a woman deserves a roof more than a man, but a man is supposed to be your provider. So you expect a man to be your provider, but you are not responsible, or you don't call yourself responsible to have to be there for him in his issues or his problems. That's the issue. To me, I would concur that to selfishness. And I think I'm definitely one to have been selfish, because I saw, like, with this homeless thing, I work with homeless people on a day to day. I help house people, I help find people resources. The majority of the clients that I work with are male, and the majority of resources that I have for them to benefit from are not many, because majority of the resources that we have here in our city, Milwaukee, are geared towards women and children. So if you are not a woman, or you are not a woman with a child, then you got to pick from the slim pickings. If I'm being honest, you have to choose from the slim pickings. And with men being making up 80% of the homeless population, but we also require the most of a man, I'm just confused. How can I require so much from a person, but I also don't provide protection for the mind, for the soul, for the person that I am requiring the most from? I'm confused. Why does it not go hand in hand? You provide me the most, as far as work ethic, and as far as providing for a home and keeping a home stable, because the man is supposed to be the man. The man is the base, the man is the foundation of which things are supposed to function. But let that man fall off, and society does not see him as, being man enough to be able to keep himself in line. So another thing was, men are also the main victims in workplace fatalities. This is something that I didn't recognize, something that I didn't know, because I don't really pay attention much to like mass murders, or like, like these school shootings and things like that. And I don't pay attention to those things for my own personal reason, because it's just extremely depressing. But I just really think, like, it's just crazy to me. Like, why would men be, I have to dive more into it and see what the cause or reason is. But yeah, on to the next one. Boys have greater dropout rates in school than girls. So with boys having more protection around them, men having more guidance, having more mentors, having more things around them, they're more geared towards being successful in life. But with the wrong type of group around them, the wrong type of people, giving them the drive, they will drop off of the idea of continuing school. They would drop off of the idea of continuing anything. I even had, I posed a question on Facebook, and one of the people, she mentioned that someone that she knows personally, he had plans to go to college. He had his whole career figured out, what he was going to do. But due to the fact that there were other men who did not support him, there were other people who did not believe that what he was doing was actually going to better himself, he decided to not go through with it. He decided not to go through with it because they made it seem as though education is weak. Education does not help a person to push themselves to a better life, when college isn't for everybody. I don't believe college is for everybody, but when you see that there is, especially men, because there are way more African American women with college degrees than there are black men, and that's just point blank period. um like, why would we not encourage one another to go from point A to point B in the easiest manner, so that they too may be eventually able to help you with whatever it is, instead of holding each other down? It's weird. It's absolutely weird to me. um so one of the things that they did say in this study is that the negligence to look down on the corporate ladder, to look at the men who are not doing well for themselves, um, is basically a setup to keep men from benefits of progression. So, point two, the gender system harms both men and women differently for the benefit of the group. So, when I say that, I mean like men, for example, men, they are granted greater status, whereas women are granted greater protection. So in our society, it is more important for a man to have status and to have money than it is for women to have status or have money. But women will fight to the death to gain that status, but then play the victim role when they lose their protection due to their gained status. But men, on the other hand, men are granted greater status, but they lack the protection. So if a man is lacking protection and he seeks protection, his manhood is then questioned because of him seeking the protection from anyone. I'm sorry, I'm getting a text. From anyone regarding the need for protection. And this then just makes men vulnerable to the process of the dehumanization. So this makes men more vulnerable to mental health issues. This makes men more vulnerable to subsiding to what will then put him in a position to make rash decisions that may end him in a position that he does not want to be in. For instance, when young men are making decisions to, like, for instance, men who are making decisions, like, there are young men. My sister and I just had a conversation, and she used to run a battered women's shelter. And she told me that there were young men who would call the shelter and, try to get resources or get help for things that they had going on, because these men were seeking help because they too were being battered, they too were being abused by women, and they too were being sexually assaulted. But everywhere they looked, they did not have any resources, they did not have anything to go to, but they heard about her. And when they contacted her, she had things to provide. But the crazy part is, when I think about it, like, men who are in vulnerable states, they either stay in that state and say nothing, or they reach out for resource and help and receive nothing. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. So if she mentioned that the young men who would call, it was young men as young as like 17 to 19, 15 to 19 years old, calling, asking, is there some place that I can go? Because they're having sex for a home to live. So these young men having sex with women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And they're only doing this to be able to maintain some place to live. They're only doing this to be able to maintain money in their hand, maintain a status. How can we not say that that is, obviously, to me, like, if I have a 15-year-old who is being forced, that's obviously molestation. It's molestation. I don't care how you see it, how you put it. If a grown woman is forcing you to touch her, to have sex with her, you ain't telling me that, oh yeah, the first time I had sex I was like 14. No, you were molested. Okay, got it. Because there's no way that we can sit here and say that women are not also destructive in that area. So just to bring my point to the surface, sexual violence in the year of 2015, there were 2 million reports and cases of male victims being raped. And these were the ones that actually were reported. And we know that men themselves, it is very hard for them to even come to the forefront or come to the light of the idea that I'm reporting that I've been sexually assaulted, because it is not seen as a social issue. It's not seen as a social issue or a problem, because men cannot possibly be able to be raped. That is absolutely false. I have 2 boys that I have to protect. And if I know that there are women perpetrators out here making a young boy feel as though he is gaining social status by having sex with her at such a young age, I'd be damned. So, the amount of victims that were reported, again, this is in the year 2015, prior to the age of 18, there were 1.5 million victims. So this is your 17-year-old, your 16-year-old, your 15-year-old, your 14-year-old. 1.5 million victims. That's a big number. Between the ages of 11 and 17, there are 718,000 victims. And again, these are just the cases that actually were reported, because we know that there's still a mass majority of men who would refuse to report. And then the age of 10 years old and under, there are 738,000 victims. And when I say victims, the perpetrator could have been a man or a woman. But we're not going to take off of the shadow or the spotlight that, yes, a woman can and will, if she has the opportunity to, molest a young boy. It is definitely possible. And we're not going to play like women are not capable of such cruel behaviors, because women are just as sick as men. So, this just brings me to the point of reclassification of male issues. So, when I talk about this, when we talk about sexual violence would probably be reclassified. For a man, it would be classified as a racial issue, a class issue, a immigration issue, a social issue, or what have you. Whereas female problems are gender issues. Gender issues have way more publication than classified issues in different scales. So if a female problem, like a female commits a crime or there's something going on or whatever the case, that would get way more publication than any other problem or issue. They always get way more publication. And if there are violent crimes committed towards women, it is rendered a gender problem rather than being classified. So if it's not classified as a social issue, because when you go under social issues, oh, it's 100 million social issues. So there's no way that we can possibly depict that men are actually having a gender issue. And then limited male problems to purely internal issues based on gender roles. So men's problems are based on their gender role. For instance, I know we've heard this all before. Um, if you're in a relationship, for instance, you're in a relationship and something comes up, you're arguing or whatever, and he has something to say, you're like, well, ain't you a man? Ain't a man supposed to lead the house? Ain't a man supposed to do this, that, or the other? Subjecting him to his gender role in the relationship rather than sitting and listening to the actual mental, emotional issue that he has. Men are often subjected to their gender role whenever they do present issues to anyone, which is unfair because when me as a woman, when I project my issues, it becomes a social emotional thing and it puts me in a position of, well, she needs more help, she needs someone there, she needs a mentor, she needs this, that, and the other. Whereas the man is then put, when he is placed in his gender role, he is then expected to go hunt and seek something that is not really there for him. There isn't a resource for you. There isn't something out there for you, which then puts me in a position to say, well, women, why are you not the threshold, the comfort spot, the place of tenderness for a man to really be able to seek and come to be able to lay his head on your shoulder or talk to you about something without the idea of, well, this is something that you have to fix on your own. This is something that you have to continue to deal with by yourself. When why should he have to when you don't have to? Why should a man have to always find his own resource or hunt for his own things, and then he's hunting for things that aren't even really accessible to him? But once you start your hunt and you go on your hunt, everything is accessible to you. It just doesn't make sense to me. So another thing is men are constrained by the role of provider and protection, and all they have to do is solve their problems to change their attitude. And that's not necessarily true because a man doesn't always have the answer to the problem that he seeks to solve. And sometimes the answer that he needs is with another person. But in this midst of him searching for the answer, he's being shut down. He's being put down by various people. He's not offered a hand of help. He's majority of the time seen as weak or as somebody who is not able to compete or someone who is in competition for the victim status. And that's not always the case. So, yeah, it just really blew my mind. All of the research I did for this topic, I was just sitting here like, what? Like, really? So, another thing that I noticed is that female issues are often shown as external, whereas men's issues are shown as internal. So, when I say women's issues are external, it's always saying like her environment is the reason why she acts like this. Um, what is it? The resources that she has are limited. She needs a better home. She needs a better car. She needs more clothes. She needs this to be able to help her. But that also speaks to, which could be another subject, to society deeming women as only physical creatures, physical beings, because society does look at women from a surface point of view. If you're not beautiful, then it ain't much that people want to do with you. So that's why I believe that women's issues are more of an external thing, whereas men is more of an internal. A lot of people believe that an internal thing for men is solely really based on the fact that men are seen to be less emotional beings, but men should be provided the opportunity to still be as emotional. A man should be able to cry if there is something to cry about. A man should be able to express himself freely without him being deemed as being what, gay, or being deemed as anything. Because even in the LGBTQ plus culture, I mean, their big thing is self-expression. Their big thing is being able to put it out there and say, you know, this is me, this is how I feel, this is this, and I want you to accept it. But a heterosexual male cannot do that, because he is then deemed as lesser than, he is then deemed as being like being too soft or anything like that. And just those things, period, it doesn't make a man soft to be able to speak his emotions. And I think, like, if you meet the right type of woman, she will actually say that it feels great to be able to hear her man say, you know, I feel more comfortable coming home and being able to talk to you about my day because nobody else is listening to it. So, what was that? For a while, there was this whole bandwagon of be his piece when, and it was being played as a joke. But the truth really is, you need to start trying to learn how to be his piece and try to be your own piece, because half of the time you your own issue. Because I feel like a lot of times we create our own issues as women when we don't make the choice of truly healing or taking the time to process our thoughts and emotions first before we protrude our emotions and our thoughts on another person without actually taking the time to really evaluate, why am I feeling this way? What has he said that triggers me? What has he said that is going to, has he said that is going to put me in a position that I have to act so irrational or irate? So, the last thing that I want to close out with is a quote from the actual book review of Dehumanizing Men. And it says, the woman who demands protection doesn't lose her femininity, but the man who asks for it does. It damages his reputation as a man. And in the case of traditionalism, he is then less of a man, or he is privileged. Or he is a privileged man who is pretending to be a victim and has no rights to be played as a victim. So that put into perspective for me that any man who is seeking protection should be able to reach out and receive protection. It is unfair that women are able to have a feminine idea of something and they lose no trait of who they are. They lose no trait of where they come from. It just makes them more powerful, more of a free woman. Whereas if a man asks for protection, especially a man who cannot protect himself, if he asks for protection, he's then seen as I stated before, less privileged. He is seen as a less of a man, and he is seen as nothing. But I do want people to also take away the idea that too, it's not fair that people believe that men should be able to take care of everything without the resource of actually being able to actually receive something so that he can benefit his community. If I can't receive something to benefit my community, then I really don't see why I'm here. I really don't see what I'm doing. And I think us as women, we have to be way more empathetic and way more progressive and proactive with making sure that the men of our community have the things that they need. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. I'm thankful to be back, to be going ahead and starting these episodes. If you are interested in being a part of the podcast and being a guest, it would be great to have you. You'll be able to reach me on the Naked Eye Instagram page. It is the Naked Eye, I as in me, underscore underscore. And you could just let me know if you have a topic that you'd like me to talk about. I do now have a email address that you can send your advice, your reviews, or anything like that to me. If you have any topics you'd like me to cover, you can also shoot me an email letting me know that you'd like me to cover that topic. And if you'd like to be a guest, just let me know. So with that being said, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later.